My name is Raul Roncal, and I'll be giving the second presentation to the series of presentations we've been listening to in the community regarding the Catholic social doctrines. Now, for today, what we will cover is the call to social political responsibilities as disciples. Let me recall something that I said in the first talk. If we see that the world around us is in need, uh, it's very clear that the social teachings of the church is something that we've heard many times. It's something that we recall people reminding us of the need to look at the needs of those around us. If you see that relevant to our situation here in the Philippines, it's hard to close our eyes the needs of our society. And part of what opens our eyes to the needs of society is we are disciples. And in Matthew chapter 25, Jesus describes the righteous ones, the one who believe in him, who have made a choice to follow him, are the ones who also recognize those who are in need. And even describes that when you feed the hungry, you're feeding him. We, in the Ligaya, have always heard this call to social action. And it's part of who we are because we are disciples. Even in the Sword of Spirit documents, there is a description of the need to stand for social justice, to fight against oppression. Uh, we defend the cause of Christ in society and the church when it is being opposed or undermined. Clearly, in the documents here, in the Sword of Spirit, we are meant to fight for the cause of Christ. Now, what is the cause of Christ? In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus describes his ministry this way. Luke chapter 4, 17 to 19. Let me read it to you. And the scroll and the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind. Set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Here, Jesus quotes the prophet Isaiah. The prophet Isaiah prophesying of the Messiah, the anointed one, who will come to proclaim good news to the poor and to set captives free. If you hear this, the cause of Christ is centered on transforming society and allowing the gospel and the Spirit of God to permeate our lives. That sounds very familiar because if you see the teachings of the Catholic Church on the social issues of our times, this is something that they are repeating. So they're speaking similar to the description of the sword, the spirit of the call for us, and similar to what's in the scriptures. The Catholic Church speaks of the same things. Now, here is a collection of teachings that the Catholic Church has put together in a book, in a document entitled The Compendium of the Social Doctrines of the Church. And I will give some of the insights about the social doctrines using this book. Let's see the first description. The compendium says, the church continues to speak to all peoples and all nations. For it is only in the name of Christ that salvation is given to men and women. Salvation which the Lord Jesus obtained at a price. Is achieved in the new life that awaits the righteous after death. But it also permeates the world in the realities of the economy and labor, of technology and communication, of society and politics, of the international community and the relations among cultures and peoples. What is that first paragraph saying? For the salvation that Jesus proclaimed was obtained with the price, and this new life is something that we would receive when the Lord comes again in his glory. But at the same time, it is meant to permeate the world today, right now. And that is where the Catholic Church is coming from. When it speaks about the need to make a difference in society, it's coming from this conviction. Salvation is obtained with a price, and this new life is meant to be experienced by all. And you would see this in the way the Catholic Church has spoken about the social ills of our society. And so, why and how has it continued to speak regarding the social issues of the world? Um, Let me give you a quick overview of the different teachings that we have received from the Catholic Church. And again, this is a quick overview. And just to tell you that the church has constantly spoken against the issues of society. Rerum Novarum, spoken at the tail end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. Pope Leo XIII spoke of the new things coming in. What was that? The Industrial Revolution, the need to take concern for workers. How do we balance the capital that we gain and share it with those who are working, the laborers in their conditions? That social teaching is something that was very consistent. And later on, after the Second World War, again, the Catholic Church reminded us of the need to preserve the peace by valuing human rights and restoring justice and recognizing that human rights is important in order for us to maintain peace in the world. John the 23rd wrote this in 1963. Again, the follow-up, Pope Paul VI, as the world started developing, again reminded us of the need to recognize that human development can only happen if there is a concern for the social aspects and liberation against the structural injustices society is creating. Popularium progresso was something that Pope Paul VI wrote. John Paul II followed up the teachings on labor by writing a encyclical entitled Laborem Exercens, through work. But he was emphasizing the need to recognize that what makes work good is not the work itself, but the worker. That human labor, by its very necessity, is connected to the dignity of the worker. And so that we need to take concern for the social needs of everybody, especially those who are working hard and laboring to provide for us. Again, Laborem Exercens follows the different ideas from Rerum Novarum. Benedict XVI spoke of the need to again be cautious about human development, and that as human development is something that is a concern for society, we need to make sure that it's the right kind of human development. Charity will only be achieved if there is truth behind it. Pope Francis, I think, is very clear about his message also, his social concerns. The gospel of joy, Evangelium Gaudium, reminds us that the proclamation of the gospel must be linked with our concern for the poor and those who are in need. And we can no longer, he says, trust in the unseen forces in the visible hands of the market. We need to take action and provide for those who are in need. Last but not the least, again, Pope Francis, a concern for the world, a concern for us human beings is connected to our concern for our home, our environment, Laudato Si. In these teachings, you see that the Catholic Church consistently proclaims the gospel that's meant to permeate our life as human beings. And that's the reason why it speaks. Why is it concerned about society? Why is the Catholic Church concerned about the affairs of the world? It's coming from some of the principles that move us in terms of our teachings in the Catholic Church that's meant to be listened to by all men of goodwill, and also especially all Christians. And what are these principles? Let me explain something very important. What are principles in the first place? Well, principles are truths that help us understand how we're supposed to behave. Let me um, just give you a simple analogy. When I teach people how to swim, I first convince them of a principle. And what's that principle? The principle that water can make you float. Understanding that truth is foundational for me to then teach my students the right way of breathing, the right strokes, in order for them to float and swim. Principles help us understand how to look at the world and how to behave. The same thing with the social doctrines of the church. We sometimes don't understand where the church is coming from because we do not understand those principles. So let me at least give you a description of some of the principles, not all, but some of the principles that guide the Catholic Church in speaking against the issues of society. The different teachings that the popes have written are coming from these principles. Let's go through those principles one by one. The first principle, which I think is the foundational principle of all principles of the social teachings of the church, and that is the principle of human dignity. Some say that the Catholic teachings come from a personalist principle, a recognition of the value of the human person's dignity. What is dignity? Well, dignity is a word that pertains to value. And here, our human dignity is based on the truth that we are created in the image of God. Why is that so significant? If our value is connected to the fact that we are imago Dei, image and likeness of God, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is this: our dignity is not dependent on who we are. It's not dependent on what we have, on our race, our physical status. It's not dependent on that. That's why when we talk about people who are poor, who have less in life, the normal thinking is modern world would think this way: oh, they don't have money, so they are of less value. The principle of human dignity, imago Dei, says this: no, the poor, even if they don't have the economic status that is considered of value in the world, because they are human beings sharing in the image and likeness of God, created in the image and likeness of God, they are of value. That's why the concern for the poor is something that is evident in the teachings of the Catholic Church, because we see everyone as someone who is of value. Human dignity is unchanging because it is a gift from God. The inviolable dignity of the human person, nothing diminishes our human dignity. That is a principle of the social doctrines of the church. If you understand that principle, that nothing diminishes human dignity, then you would see a connection, the next principle, the principle of the common good. If everyone is of value, then we also need to aim to provide everyone with what they need, because they are human beings with dignity. Compendium that describes this principle this way: the principle of the common good to which every aspect of social life must be related, if it is to attain its fullest meaning, stems from the dignity and unity and equality of all people. According to its primary and broadly accepted sense, the common good indicates that the sum total of social conditions which allow people, either in groups or as individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. I think that's a very important thing to understand. The common good indicates the sum total of the social conditions which allow people, either as groups or as individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. To aim for the common good, we're aiming that we recognize everyone is of value. That's why the third principle that follows this is also very important. If we value each human being and we are aiming for their good equally, then we must also recognize another thing. We are one. We are united. The principle of solidarity. Compendium on the principle explains the principle of solidarity this way. Solidarity highlights in a particular way the intrinsic social nature of the human person, the equality of all in the dignity and rights of individuals and peoples towards an even more committed unity. We are social in nature, and we need to recognize our equality and our dignity. And because of that, there is a commonality and a connectedness to all of us. And because of that, we need to be committed to that unity, the principle of solidarity. And if you see this at work, you will see these principles, and there are many other principles, there are a few more, but I explained the main ones. But it would help us understand, yes, because that's the principle, this is the way we act. Because those are the principles, this must be our set of actions. Let me give you an example. Why would you help? In this past year, we've experienced the pandemic. And we heard, example, that our neighbors, just right around the corner, you know that they are in need of food. They don't have much. If you follow the principle of human dignity, you immediately will think they are of value, they're important. And not only that, they're important and they are in need. And if they are in need, you guys should do something. Why would you do something? Because you also know and recognize you are connected to them. That we have a connection to each other. I heard of a story of a village somewhere here in Metro Manila. In the height of the pandemic last year, they recognized that that the neighbors outside the subdivision were in need. And to make their life good so that they can provide for the needs of their neighbors, they started contributing money and they started distributing sacks of rice to their neighbors who were in need. Again, valuing the other, recognizing their need to experience also the good, and recognizing our connectedness. The social doctrines of the church are founded on these principles and they lead us to certain actions. Now, let me conclude by giving you some implications to our life in the community as a Ligaya. And this is not an exhaustive list. I'm just giving examples of what we do and what we would like to do more of so that we can recognize, yes, these principles I know and I must live them out. Our efforts to evangelize, to bring the gospel to others, is connected to our recognition of the value of others Because we value them, we want to give them the best thing that we could give, our relationship with Christ. And if they recognize their relationship with Christ, they can live a life recognizing their dignity. We create communities that support each other, and we build communities that support each other because we want people to recognize their relationship with God. We want to proclaim the gospel. It's connected to the social doctrines of the church. But we don't move only to those we evangelize. We also are trying our best to help those who are in need. There are many things that we've been doing in the past that constantly reaches out to those who are in need. And that is because of our consciousness of a need to help those around us. This project, Gabay Aral, for our Tahanan ng Panginoon brothers and sisters, is a recognition that they are of value that we want to provide for something as basic as education. But we don't even stop there. We even want to guide them and do some kind of mentoring relationship with the people that we are sponsoring. These ministries is an application of the social doctrines of the church. And we need to do more, to find out more ways of doing it. This is also very important. Why should I take responsibility as a citizen? And why is it connected to the social doctrines of the church? Because being a responsible citizen in our country, the Philippines, for example, is connected to our recognition that we are part of a society and that we value our fellow Filipinos and that we also want their good. A simple act of voting wisely, what's behind that? We want to choose the right leaders who would lead well, remove corruption, and if they do that, Filipinos will live in a better condition. And if I take responsibility for that, I can make a difference. So that's just an example of how being a good citizen is connected to our valuing others, valuing their good, and recognizing our solidarity with them. A simple act of being a good citizen is connected to the social doctrines of the church. Last example, standing up against injustice. There are laws of the land, and the laws are designed by civil society to protect the rights of everyone, the common good, that each human person is of value. Social doctrines of the church. So when we discover that certain rights are not respected, we stand up for that. We go against that. The drug war. Taking away drugs is not bad from our society, but doing it unjustly is wrong. Extrajudicial killings, by its very definition, is the killing of human beings without respecting their rights. This, I think, is very clear. It's very clear because it's an example of something that we need to go against if we are Christians, if we apply the doctrines of the Catholic Church on social issues. Why? Human dignity, the value of the person. Oh, but he's a drug addict. Yeah, but he has rights. He is a person with dignity. What he did and what he is doing with his life, yes, he's breaking the law, and yet he is also of value. And we need to also respect that and give him due process or give her due process. So I hope that this example gives you the reason why we are aware of what's happening in society and that we are watchful and vigilant to stand up against oppression and injustice. These are just examples. And the main aim here is to give us a idea of why we do what we do in connection with the social doctrines of the church. So Let me end by saying that the aim of this is to remind us disciples that we have a responsibility to take concern for those around us. Because discipleship also recognizes that salvation and the life of Christ is meant to permeate the world. And as we continue to live out these different principles in our life and allow it to affect the way we live, then we can take social responsibility. And we can also make a difference in society. I hope that this presentation will help you understand even more some of the principles of the social doctrines of the church. And I will also send out different links that could lead you to further studies of this area of our life as disciples. And I promise to also give you different links that you can go to so you can study this some more. God bless us, and I hope that this presentation will help you understand the social doctrines of the church. Thank you very much.